Hello everyone and welcome back to LPRs Delivery. Today's lesson will get back started with the structure or grammar again, talking about common verb patterns. So by verb patterns, we mean something like this. I must have a current license. I sometimes forget to turn off my phone. I don't mind working in shifts. So for these, we can look at the verbs. If we look at the verbs, we see must have, forget to turn, and enjoy working. So we notice that when we have certain verbs, we follow with different forms of other verbs. For example, must have is followed by just the base verb or the infinitive. Sometimes we follow a verb with to plus the infinitive. And sometimes we follow a verb with the ing or the gerund form of the verb. First, let's look at this type. I must have a current license. This type of verb we call a modal verb. In English, there are many modal verbs, but these are what we call the principal modal verbs. These are the most common. Can and could, will and would, shall and should, may, might, must. So you can remember them by putting them into groups. CC, WW, sh, and Ms. Can and could, will and would, shall and should, may, might, must. Now, these verbs are used for things like possibility, permission, and things like that. One thing to note about the structure, we can say, I can be late, I could be late, I will be late, etc., is that when we use modal verbs, we follow them with the bare infinitive, which means the base verb without to. Now, here are some common mistakes using modal verbs. You should to go to the doctor. Notice that should is a modal, so we can't say to go. This might be confusing because many times we do say to go. You need to go to the doctor. You have to go to the doctor. So even though the meaning of should and need and have are very similar, they are different types of words. So we notice that we can't say to go. You should go to the doctor. Another common mistake is this one. I can't swimming very well. Notice that can't is the negative of can, so it's also a modal verb. And remember, we follow modal verbs with the bare infinitive. This would be the gerund, so we can't say swimming. We must say, I can't swim very well. Another common mistake about modal verbs is pronunciation. Let's look at this one. I can. I can't. Notice they sound very, very similar. And you might think the difference is the T. However, listen again. I can. I can't. Notice we don't say, I can't. The T is not very loud and it's not very easy to hear. The difference is more about the length. Let's look at a demonstration. So watch as I record my voice in Adobe Audition. I can. I can't. I can. I can't. So if you'll notice these, you'll see here, this one is can, and this one here is can't. So we see the difference that when we say can, it's longer. I can. But can't is more abrupt, it's harder, and also a bit shorter. Can, can't. So again, when we see these, the sounds are pretty much the same. I can, or I can't. Notice in British English, though, they might say can't. So I can, I can't. But American English is very similar. Can, can't. The other problem that people have with pronunciation is when we say can and can't in a sentence. In this case, the stress changes, which also changes the sound. So when we use modal verbs in the positive, we don't usually stress them. But when modal verbs are negative, we do stress them. So for this example, we would say, I can swim very well. Whereas negative, we'd say, I can't swim very well. Notice the difference. We have here, can. I can swim, bum. I can swim very well. Notice the sound is can. I can swim. However, when it's negative, notice we use the same pronunciation as before. American English would say, I can't swim very well. British might say, I can't swim very well. So again, be careful about your stress because that might make the difference between positive and negative. This is true with most modal verbs, so it's even true for should and shouldn't. In a sentence, when we're speaking with proper rhythm, it would sound like this. Controllers should be on time. Controllers should be on time. But if it was negative, we could say, controllers shouldn't be on time. Shouldn't be, should be, shouldn't be. Now we've talked about this type of verb pattern, which is used with modal verbs. Next, we'll look at these two. Sometimes we follow with to infinitive, sometimes we follow with gerunds. First, let's look at these types of words. I like to watch Korean TV series. I like watching Korean TV series. My daughter loves to play games. My daughter loves playing games. I prefer to work in the radar room. I prefer working in the radar room. For these, both ways are correct. So there are many verbs, for example, like, love, and prefer, in which we can use both ways with no difference or with very little difference in meaning. Words like these include hate, begin, start, continue, can't stand, or can't bear. So for example, I hate going to the mall. I hate to go to the mall. We can use both. However, there are some verbs that are like this. I agreed to move to Chiang Mai. I agreed moving to Chiang Mai. In this case, we can't say the ing form. We must use the infinitive with to. Likewise, after school, I decided to join the Air Force. We decide to do something, not decide doing something. Likewise, now I'm waiting to be promoted. We wait to do something. We don't wait doing something. Other similar verbs are appear, ask, can afford or can't afford, deserve, expect, need, plan, seem, and would like. Next, there are some verbs that we can use both ways, but the meaning is different. For example, I forgot to tell you. So this means that I didn't tell you. However, I forgot telling you means that I did tell you, but I can't remember doing it. So in this case, the meaning is different. For another example, the ground crew stopped to clear the runway. This would mean that the crew was doing something else, then stopped and began clearing the runway. So for example, maybe the ground crew was eating lunch, and they stopped eating lunch and then cleared the runway. So the ground crew stopped to clear the runway. However, the ground crew stopped clearing the runway would mean this. The crew was clearing the runway and then quit. So this would mean the ground crew was clearing and then stopped doing that to do something else. So the ground crew stopped to clear the runway. The ground crew stopped clearing the runway. Now, we've looked at modals where we follow with just the bare infinitive. We've looked at verbs where we only use to with infinitive. We've looked at verbs where we can use both. And we've looked at verbs where we can use both with different meaning. Lastly, we'll look at words like enjoy. I enjoy working in shifts. But we cannot say I enjoy to work in shifts. There are many words like this as well. Ajahn Nathan advises to read Aviation News Daily, or Ajahn Nathan advises reading Aviation News Daily. Right? So we see the same pattern, but just like before, we can say advise doing something, but not advise to do something. I don't mind working in remote aerodromes. I practice listening with YouTube. So don't mind doing something, not don't mind to do something. Practice doing something, not practice to do something. Other similar verbs include avoid doing something, consider doing something, deny doing something, miss doing something, recommend doing something, or suggest doing something. So that's today's lesson on verb patterns. Do keep in mind that this lesson doesn't tell you everything you need to know about verb patterns. It's a huge topic in English with many different rules and many different exceptions. So you might need to investigate this further on your own. For that purpose, I'll include some links to some more quizzes and lessons about experimenting with these verbs in different ways. I'll provide that by email and in the Facebook group in case you'd like to learn further. So thank you for your time and see you next time on LPR's Delivery. ขอบคุณครับ สวัสดีครับ